but I think we will go ahead and get started, and hopefully everyone will join in the next few minutes. So welcome, everyone. My name is Brittany Teague. If I don't know you, I'm an associate attorney at Womble, and I practice commercial real estate law. I am one of the co-liaisons of our Winston-Salem WOW, or Women of Womble group, along with Alika Monroe. And we hope that each of you are doing well and that your families are healthy. And we're excited to be able to get together with everyone again. As many of you know, the Winston-Salem WOW group hosts quarterly events, and obviously our remaining 3 events in 2020 were canceled, but we are grateful to be able to get together with you virtually to close out the year. And along with many of our Womble folks on this virtual event, it looks like we have representation from our colleagues at Reynolds, the Winston-Salem Foundation, Wells Fargo, Belk, Innisflint, Deckert, Wake Forest University, Novant Health, Hayden Design, and of course, Old Salem Museums and Gardens. So on behalf of the Womble team, thank you guys for joining us today. Whenever I mention to someone that I live in Winston-Salem, many times someone will ask if I've been to Old Salem or tell me a story about how they visited Old Salem in school or among the holidays. But aside from Old Salem being such a prominent historic site and museum in our community, the folks at Old Salem are dedicated to exploring the stories of Moravian, Indigenous, and people of African descent in the American South. And today we're very thankful to have Martha Hartley, who's the director of Moravian Research at Old Salem, join us and provide a presentation that highlights the Hidden Town project. Martha is a Winston-Salem native, and she received undergraduate degrees at Hollins College and then went on to spend a year in Paris during college and received her master's degree in urban planning and a certificate in historic preservation from the University of Virginia. Martha is a preservation planner, and she has experience in community preservation, advocacy, and public awareness. For over 30 years, Martha and her husband, Michael, who's an anthropologist and is the retired director of archaeology at Old Salem, have worked together studying archaeology, history, landscape, and preservation of the Moravian communities in the Winston-Salem area. And for their work, they've been honored to receive the Robert E. Stipe Professional Award from Preservation North Carolina, the Archie K. Davis Award from the Wachovia Historical Society, and the Hall of Fame Community Service Award from the Liberian Organization of the Piedmont. In addition, the Manette C. Duffy Landscape Preservation Award from Preservation North Carolina to the Bethania Historical Association was on behalf of the Hartley's work. In the last decade, Martha's work at Old Salem has included culture outreach, and the revised and expanded Old Salem National Historic Landmark District document. And for a little over 4 years, Martha has been working and involved with the Hidden Town project to research and reveal the history of enslaved and free people of African descent in Salem, North Carolina. We are all in for a treat this afternoon for Martha's presentation, and I would ask you guys, if you have any questions, there'll be an opportunity at the end for you to ask those via the chat feature in WebEx, or we're happy for you to speak up and ask them directly as well. And then we'll also be doing a raffle at the end for an Old Salem gift basket. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Martha.
Oh, well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Brittany, for the introduction. And thank you also for the invitation to be here. It's great to be with the Women of Womble. And as Brittany said, I will present today an overview history of Winston-Salem and share with you some of our work with the Hidden Town Project. I'm going to begin sharing my screen here. Now, when I when you were talking, sometimes you were going in and out. Is that you, or will I face that too, do you think, Abby?
I was able to hear Brittany just fine, so hopefully that was just on your speaker's end. But
okay, well, I don't know if that'll impact me, so I apologize at the beginning. I am meeting you all from way out in Stokes County where I live, so internet is sometimes dicey.
I can hear you great so far. So.
Brittany? All right, and can you see that?
Okay. That's good.
Okay, I'm going to get rid of my picture so you don't have to look at me. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to engage with you with the history of Winston-Salem and also the work that we're doing with the Hidden Town Project. And then, as Brittany said, I will engage your comments and questions. Now, as we go along, I want you to please consider how we live our history today. And I would offer to you that the challenge for us in the world at this moment is to use our insights from the historical record to repair past wrongs and to move forward in human relationship. Winston-Salem was built by European-derived people and people of African descent. They are the city's DNA. Old Salem's antique buildings are prominent in the foreground here. Called the City of Arts and Innovation, Winston-Salem gets its credentials from the Moravian Church, which began building the community in the 1750s. Their archival records tell us much about the past. Moravian Church origins are in the Unitas Fratrum, an ancient Protestant group in 15th century Bohemia. At the same time, Portuguese ships seeking gold in Africa began filling their holds with human cargo. New World labor needs then fueled the transatlantic slave trade. In most of Europe, slavery was uncommon by the late 18th century, but in America, land was stolen from native peoples and exploited for wealth creation through the labor of kidnapped, enslaved Africans. Crimes against humanity of epic proportion and with durable impact. In the 1730s, the renewed Moravian Church in Europe embarked on global mission work, beginning with enslaved people in the West Indies and soon extending to Greenland, South America, and Africa. Bethlehem, Pennsylvania was the first permanent congregation in North America, and in 1753, the Moravians purchased 100,000 acres in the backcountry of Piedmont, North Carolina, and named it Wachovia. Although the Moravians had encountered Native Americans in their land search across North Carolina, indigenous people had already been pushed from the Wachovia land. We must acknowledge the sin of colonialization. Wachovia was 250 miles from the sea, was positioned to trade via overland routes. Moravians were excellent planners and created an unparalleled place in 18th century America. Early Wachovia included Salem and surrounding congregations that grew into Winston-Salem, and they are closely related. There are 30 Moravian churches in Forsyth County today. Today, Salem is Old Salem, a National Historic Landmark tourist destination and 90-acre neighborhood with residences, Moravian church entities, Salem Academy and College, and the oldest standing African-American church in North Carolina. St. Philip's Moravian is a remarkable touchstone of the Black experience in Winston-Salem. St. Philip's is the only historic Black Moravian church in the United States. They are spiritual descendants of one of the oldest African-American congregations of any denomination. Significant in American history, the congregation has been engaged by the Smithsonian, and the local community is interested in the deep history as well. St. Philip's uniqueness is the story of the Moravian Church in the American South and speaks to the complicated history of slavery and its enduring effect, which brought about the Hidden Town. People of African descent had lived in Salem since the colonial period, but Jim Crow laws and redlining changed all that. By the 1930s, Salem was a segregated white neighborhood, and the Black presence became a hidden town. In 1950, the museum was established to preserve the Old Salem. In the meantime, St. Philip's Moravian congregation had wanted to move for years. And they did so in 1952. They moved from Old Salem across the creek to Happy Hill, initially worshiping in the community center there. The neighborhood suffered major loss when 14 city blocks were torn down to build the city's first public housing project, Happy Hill Gardens. People meant new possibility, but then US Highway 52 destroyed St. Philip's new church and part of the neighborhood. The congregation moved again to Bon Air Avenue in East Winston. Residential security maps and redlining were formal means of racial discrimination. Black neighborhoods were highlighted as high risk and denied loans or fair loans, and homes were undervalued, all depriving African Americans of wealth building. Scant municipal infrastructure in Black neighborhoods led to disrepair, which often ended with bulldozing. Public policy targeted Black neighborhoods for urban renewal and highway development. The map shows African American neighborhoods in dark pink, the fourth grade or least desirable. In green, West Highlands, Buena Vista, and Westview are the only neighborhoods considered first grade. In the 1950s and 1960s, new highway alignments were a connect-the-dot exercise for Black neighborhoods, it seemed. I've added the highway corridors to the map here, and you can see Interstate 40 and US 52 destroyed and traumatized African American neighborhoods in mid-20th century Winston-Salem. The purple circle indicates Happy Hill, where Highway 52 took St. Philip's new church. Destruction included homes, businesses, churches, livelihoods, and social fabric. This aerial looks across the eradication of place to downtown Winston-Salem in the background. The highways intersected at the original location of the Blue Street neighborhood, now part of the Innovation Quarter. Barbara Morris is a St. Philip's Moravian who grew up in that neighborhood with her grandmother. Active in the civil rights movement, she continues to advocate for the neighborhood memory. Just last week, a new mural by artist Leo Rucker was dedicated on 7th Street in downtown across from Enmar. Barbara Morris is one of the people memorialized, and she stands next to her nearly completed portrait. Leo Rucker is painting on site and hopes to complete the project this month. The mural records people and places in the once thriving African American downtown that was lost in the mid-20th century to highway development and urban renewal. US 52 remains a barrier and excludes East Winston from downtown's revitalization. Following the May 25th murder of George Floyd, groundswell response prompted local demonstrations. A June 2nd protest called out this highway history, and young activists occupied 52, shutting it down. One activist said, quote, "Nobody should live in this city and not know the truth," unquote. For decades, the old St. Philip's Church building sat empty in Old Salem, until, one might say, the hand of God intervened. On St. Philip's Anniversary Day in 1989, a tornado damaged the church. Earnest efforts then began to address this highly significant place and to understand the history. Scholarship was developed through the vast documentation of the Moravian archives. Architectural work and archaeology were key to the restoration. During structural investigation, 20 gravestones were uncovered beneath the church hall floor, and then 11 more were discovered behind the granite steps. Archaeology is invaluable to understanding and revealing the graveyards, and without intrusion into burials. And although I'm not trained as an archaeologist, I make good labor, and I did so in 1996 under the church floor. The graveyard's meaning and visibility are essential. Like the church, the land is sacred. In the Moravian tradition, St. Philip's sisters prepare the graveyard for Easter. St. Philip's was a $3 million capital campaign project for Old Salem. The log church was reconstructed to tell stories, and the brick church, a consecrated space, was restored. The graveyard was marked and the link to Happy Hill made. It opened in 2003 as part of the Old Salem experience. Free and enslaved people of African descent helped build Wachovia. In the theocratic town of Salem, slave ownership was limited to the church, with the hope of keeping enslaved numbers low and the Moravian work ethic high. Rules prohibited individual ownership. Salem's first buildings were transplanted European traditions. Like most religious groups in America, the Moravians did not object to slavery, but regarded one's place in life as ordained, with salvation the key. A small number of enslaved people chose conversion and were considered spiritual equals. This integrated fellowship for Afro-Moravians included worship and burial practices as well as educational opportunities. Abraham was a Mandingo warrior, a respected tradesman and communicant. He remained enslaved, but was buried as a spiritual equal in God's acre. Graveyards hold stories, well-known, little-known, and unknown. Salem was a town of artisans. A doctor was in residence, and music was central to this religious community that sought separation from outsiders. But commerce meant dealings with non-Moravians and their customs, styles, and traditions. The Salem Tavern was the interface and operated with the use of enslaved workers as maids, field hands, hostlers, waiters for kitchen work and housework. We have hosted 2 slave dwelling projects with high school students, sleeping where enslaved people slept in Salem, at the tavern and the Single Brothers House as examples. Fallout from the American Revolution nurtured fresh ideas about individual freedom and choice. Labor shortages prompted renting labor, and increasing numbers of Black people, free and enslaved, normalized that presence. Salem households began to rent enslaved women and girls for child care and domestic needs. The practice of slavery in Wachovia varied, and people were often moved from one community to another. Salem looked like this in this watercolor when Peter Oliver was brought from Bethania. He was an enslaved Moravian whose tenacity directed his life to freedom. He lived in the Single Brothers House and is remembered for his role in the pottery. Free in 1800, he soon married Christina Bass and leased a farm for his family. Invisible under 200 years development, the site is in design by the important landscape architect Walter Hood. The location is along the Strollway at Liberty Street. Oliver descendants are many, and you may recognize a famous local one, the NBA All-Star, Chris Paul. Peter Oliver was one of 2 or 3 enslaved Moravians who lived in the Single Brothers House. Anna Maria Samuel is the only known Afro-Moravian to have lived in the Single Sisters House. She was the oldest child of the Moravians' first enslaved person, baptized as Johannes Samuel, who lived in Bethabara. Anna Maria moved to Salem to enter the older girls' choir, lived in the Single Sisters House, and attended school. However, this spiritual equality would not last. At an Easter service in 1789, Blacks were not permitted to sit in church as usual. Tension was evident within the Moravian acculturation process. Soon thereafter, a church board reported, quote, "It was mentioned that we must not be ashamed of those Negroes who belong to our community and, as has happened before, let them sit all by themselves in the congregational worshipings and even during Holy Communion. They are our brothers and sisters, and different treatment of them will degrade ourselves to the rank of ordinary people of this world and will be a disgrace for the community." The recent Reynolds conference in September was organized by the Moravian Archives and Wake Forest Humanities, and it addressed just this topic, the complicated one of becoming American. Population in the Moravian tract continued to grow. In 1800, Wachovia was part of Stokes County, where 1,439 slaves were counted, 63 of whom were in Wachovia. Regular segregated services had begun in the outlying congregations at Hope, Friedberg, and Bethania. A paper mill had been established along Peters Creek to the west of Salem. The creek powered the mill, and the human power came from enslaved people. Since the operation was outside of town, the slave rules prohibiting individual ownership did not apply. In 1800, the new church architecture signaled changing styles and attitudes. By this time, Black worshipers were being held at the church door or turned away as segregation gained traction. Moravians believed in educating girls. A new dynamic for Salem was the girls' boarding school that non-Moravian families had requested, as education for girls was rare in the South. By 1810, enslaved labor was purchased and rented to support school needs. Born in Africa, Phoebe and Bodney were an enslaved Afro-Moravian couple who were purchased with several of their children. They were placed at the Negro quarter for church-owned slaves, about 1.5 miles from Salem Square, and Bodney was the farm manager. The farm was one of several growing up around Salem where the slave rules in town did not apply. The daughter of Phoebe and Bodney, Betsy, was purchased for the girls' school. Sam was a rented enslaved man at the single sisters' house, and fears of their association prompted their removal to a nearby farm where they married and began a family. Slavery in Salem was generational. Although the Atlantic slave trade had ended by act of Congress in 1807, there were already over 1 million slaves in the United States, and the domestic trade became robust. 3 years ago, students at Salem College protested, demanding to know the role of slavery at their school. Since that time, the school has embarked on a discovery process and joined the University Studying Slavery Consortium, with Wake Forest and over 60 colleges and universities investigating their slave past. The Hidden Town Project has presented at several universities studying slavery events, most recently this past October. An 1816 decision to accommodate boarding school students' relatives in God's Acre, if necessary, prompted the end of Afro-Moravian burials there, and the segregated Negro God's Acre was established. The sacred segregated completely in 1822 when a Christian congregation was organized for the enslaved in and around Salem. The next year, the log church was built adjacent to the new graveyard. Sunday was typically the one day off for enslaved people, and they could choose church or not. In an urban place like Salem, where enslaved families did not usually live together, church time united them and their friends. But the Moravians vied with the more charismatic Methodist and Baptist services in the area. At the reconstructed log church in Old Salem, a selection of recovered gravestones tells stories through art. One is of the free Christian Samuel, an accomplished musician who often led church music. Educated in Bethabara, he worked for the Single Sisters in their household management. The Single Sisters ran the girls' school, known as Salem Academy, by 1818. In the late 1820s and early 1830s, daughters of 2 Cherokee chiefs attended the school, including Sally Ridge. The Salem Moravians had begun Cherokee in Spring Place, Georgia in 1801. During Sally's first year in Salem, she likely knew Christian Samuel through his work at the sister's house. Christian died at age 29 and was buried in the Negro God's Acre. His story is told in the Log Church exhibition. Also included in the log church stories are those of husband and wife Timothy and Fanny. Both were born in Africa and enslaved in Bethabara and then in Salem. Timothy was over 100 years old at death, but never learned to speak English well, interpreted as a sign of resistance. They have many descendants. Historian Spencer McCall is working on a book about the family, and his cousin, Lucretia Berry, devotes herself to racism awareness. She lives in Charlotte. I recommend her TED Talk. Christian David is also presented in the log church. The ruin of the house where he lived is the only domestic site of an enslaved person explored archaeologically in Old Salem. None survive above ground. We are working with Middle Tennessee State University on virtual reality to present the invisible landscape. The Bloom House on Main Street was the location of enslaved people. And a rear detached kitchen, which is now an archaeological site, is speculated to be the slave house. North Carolina State University is assisting with geophysics as a first step to archaeology. Professor Kofi Boone, also from NC State, keynoted our landscape conference last year with his Black Landscapes Matter lecture. The farm in the foreground of the painting housed enslaved people who were manumitted and sent to Liberia in Africa in 1836 from Salem. Landscape mattered when the area Salem connection was revealed in Happy Hill through the city's historic marker program, made possible through Old Salem's research. Entrepreneurship drove industrialization in early 19th century Salem. The grist mill in the foreground was built in 1820 with private money and without the church. A banking agency established in 1815 would evolve into Wachovia Bank after the Civil War. An 1831 state law requiring militias no longer exempted the formerly pacifist Moravians. Salem's young men enthusiastically formed their unit. Fears of slave rebellions had prompted such readiness in North Carolina. At times, slave patrols were organized in Salem. In addition, new state law prohibited teaching slaves to read or write, but arithmetic continued at the church school. The growing textile industry in Salem depended on enslaved labor, first at the Freeze Woolen Mill. It was located in the vicinity of where Callidium is today. Mid-century brought sweeping changes. Salem's slave regulations were abolished as unenforceable. Not every Moravian was a slaveholder, but numbers increased. Forsyth County was established in 1849, and Salem land was sold for the new county seat named Winston. Soon, the theocracy in Salem ended. In this photograph of the stylish new Salem Academy building, columns and hoop skirts recall the Old South. The figures may not all be Moravian, but the scene reflects a Southern town nonetheless. A new segregated graveyard was established in 1859. Phoebe was over 90 years of age when she died and was buried there. She has many descendants today, including Mrs. Georgiana Page McCoy. Genealogy is a vital link in understanding dynamics, and we continue to work with the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. Betty Kogur has many descendants in the Bethania area. You may recognize her name from the fire station. In Salem, slavery was urban slavery, but out in Wachovia, there were plantations which depended on enslaved labor. Betty Kogur was born on the Jones plantation in Bethania. As in Salem, a congregation for the enslaved had been formed in Bethania, but after emancipation, the church became an AME Zion church. 25 years ago, my husband and I attended their 150th anniversary. This year, they celebrated their 175th. Descendants of Bethania's enslaved population continue to live around the town. A historic marker acknowledges their heritage, but much work remains to be done there. In 1860, the federal census described Forsyth County with a 14% enslaved population. Approximately 135 men, women, and children were enslaved by Salem residents, including 48 at the Freeze Mill. The census slave schedule enumerated unnamed slaves by their enslaver and any slave houses. Research indicates that slave houses in Salem were outbuildings with other primary uses, such as kitchen, laundry, or shop. Some enslaved people lived in the enslaver's home. The 37-year-old male is likely David Schober, who probably lived in the brick kitchen shown in the photograph. His wife was enslaved elsewhere. She died young, but their son, James Francis, went on to greatness. James Francis Schober graduated from Lincoln University, followed by medical school at Howard University, and he became a highly respected physician in Wilmington, North Carolina. He died at the young age of 35, leaving a wife and 2 daughters. It is said that he worked himself to death as the only Black physician in a city with over 10,000 African Americans. It must have been only a dream for young James Francis when the St. Philip's Brick Church was built in 1861 and known as the African Church in Salem. At the end of the Civil War, freedom was announced in the sanctuary 155 years ago and now celebrated as Juneteenth. These same pews are powerful seating for addressing racism. The Moravian Church made a formal apology for slavery in 2006. Reconciliation is the hard part. The Reverend Willard Bass, shown in the slide here, was a panelist at our event 2 years ago, and the Hidden Town Project continues to work with him in restorative justice as part of his Freedom Tree project. The freedmen prioritized education. They negotiated for land and built a school for their children in 1867. just across the creek from the African church. Housing formerly enslaved people in Salem was not welcome by all residents, and the church created a freedmen's neighborhood across the creek. Streets were laid out and lots sold for $10 each. Named Liberia, it was the first Black neighborhood in Winston-Salem and quickly called Happy Hill. A historic marker installed on Alder Street in Happy Hill references the 1867 school. Death certificates recorded more than 1,500 burials in the Happy Hill Cemetery. However, part of the cemetery was taken by Highway 52 and hundreds of graves were moved to Walkertown. Over time, the sacred ground was lost in tangles and vandalism, and Maurice Fitz Johnson sought assistance from Old Salem Archaeology. Retrieval was launched in 2010, and Mrs. Johnson continues monthly work with volunteers. Her grandparents were early Happy Hill residents who are buried there. In our recent expansion of the Old Salem National Historic Landmark District, we were able to make the case for including a portion of Happy Hill, that which had been tested archaeologically. The South collapsed with defeat in the Civil War, but Salem's economy rebounded relatively quickly. Attracted to existing infrastructure and the new rail line, R.J. Reynolds came in 1874 to establish his tobacco empire. His offer of manufacturing work then brought many rural Blacks into Winston-Salem, boosting the Black population to nearly 40% by the turn of the century. The African church was expanded in 1890 to meet educational demands of children and adults. The White Women of Home Church continued to assist. African Americans lived throughout Salem in duplexes, tenements, and single-family homes. The Sanborn Fire Insurance maps offer clues to long-gone housing. The tenements labeled Chris Bottom in the photograph are the tenements on the map. It's hard to believe they were once located in the vicinity of these Salem College dormitories. The 1898 Democratic Party victory in North Carolina solidified white supremacy, and African Americans endured growing racism and overall injustices. Winston and Salem grew side by side until the 1913 consolidation. It was also the year that the gravestones disappeared from the Negro God's Acre. In 1914, the African church was named St. Philip's Moravian Church. Textiles and tobacco made Winston-Salem the largest and wealthiest city in North Carolina until the Great Depression. African Americans participated in the growing economy with an influx of new residents and professional opportunities. Winston-Salem State University was founded in 1892 by Simon Green Atkins in the Columbian Heights neighborhood. Black city residents included attorneys, physicians, dentists, ministers, factory workers, barbers, restaurant owners, grocers, funeral directors, chauffeurs, domestics, insurance agents, teachers, and others. In 1920, Happy Hill was a cohesive neighborhood, homes, churches, schools, and stores, and gathering places. About 130 families lived on the beautiful rolling landscape without suspicion of the approaching devastation that would come with urban renewal. At the time, in the 1920s, Salem Academy and College expanded to create the familiar campus of today. The laundry scene at the construction of Kluel Dormitory emphasizes the enormous labor needs of the school. From Phoebe's descendant, Georgiana Page McCoy, is this photograph of school employees where she has everyone identified. Many school employees lived in Happy Hill. Residents walked to their jobs at the school or to tobacco factories or other employers. Access to Happy Hill at that time required crossing Salem Creek, which was dangerous as the old bridge had washed away. The metal truss bridge that's there today was built in 1936 through the perseverance of resident Wade Bidding, and it is a historic structure. Mr. Bidding also led the establishment of Happy Hill Park and was responsible for providing house numbers for residents so that they could have their mail delivered. Happy Hill is called the mother of all Black neighborhoods in Winston-Salem. Unfortunately, as we have discussed, the second half of the 20th century wrought destruction there as public policy decisions created trauma. Happy Hill is enormously important for so many reasons, and engaging Happy Hill today is part of Hidden Town work. The Happy Hill Neighborhood Association is very active under the leadership of Untitled Salem, a retired professional dancer who works to bring arts education to the neighborhood children. A community garden is also growing. Cheryl Harry and her Triad Cultural Arts are leading efforts to save Black spaces, including the shotgun houses in Happy Hill. This surviving architecture is significant to the Black experience in Winston-Salem. Triad Cultural Arts also brings the community Juneteenth and Kwanzaa celebrations. The nonprofit organization makes a big impact and needs everyone's support. The Hidden Town Project is research-driven, and I'm grateful to have students and volunteers as researchers. We work hard to identify people of African descent and build biographies, as well as to understand their life within the white Moravian world. In January, I look forward to welcoming a Salem Academy student and a Wake Forest undergraduate student as interns. Understanding truth in history is basic to the local and national conversations. Economic inequality and oppression are embedded in our society. It is no surprise that profound racial disparities persist in housing, health, education, transportation, food systems, policing, and incarceration. Environmental racism has been tolerated, and voter suppression hampers democracy. Locally and nationally, generational damage requires structural reform to policies and reparation for hundreds of years of human rights abuses. I'll conclude here, and I welcome your comments and questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martha. It's just a wealth of information, and I think so important for people in our community to learn about this history. One of the things that I'm interested in is what are the future plans for the Hidden Town Project, and what do you all hope to accomplish in the coming year to 5 years?
Well, that's a great question. And as I said at the conclusion, research is really so significant to what we're doing. And we have learned a lot, but we have a lot more to go. And we have a very systematic approach to the research in terms of understanding the residential and the commercial and industrial lots in Salem. So each time I have an intern, I assign a lot, and they go through a series of primary source documentation and some secondary to understand the history of the lot and how people of African descent may have been associated with that lot. And during that process, we encounter individuals, and that's when we begin the process of learning who people are and getting biography files. So to date, we've done about 30 lots in Salem, and we've identified over 100 individuals. So we're building those research files, and I'm sure as attorneys, you all understand the value of having a place to go to learn. So we're building those files. So that's really what my role is. I also am involved in outreach, as I mentioned. And so engaging current issues is very much a part of what we do as well. I also work with a young man who is who lives in Happy Hill and a graduate of Parkland High School in his early 20s, and he and I are working together on some research projects. So and he is a paid community researcher. So that's a way to involve the community in what we're doing. We also have other staff at the museum who are involved as well. We have a new I have a new colleague named Joel Cook, who is actually working in our Learning in Place department, which is our education department, and he is a Hidden Town programmer. So he is involved in, for instance, creating these exploratoriums that I mentioned to Brittany at the beginning when she asked about lesson plans and things for children. He's doing a lot with the Winston and Forsyth County schools to engage in this African American history and how to make it accessible to the schools. So those are all things that we're involved in right now. We also are part of what we typically do is have events and lectures. We get in now, but we are learning virtual ways to do that. Am I losing you all? Did you hear me? Okay. I'm not sure I'm connected, you all. I hope you can hear me. Anyway, it's all about learning and sharing the information, just like today. And I'm very honored to be able to share a little bit of the history of our community with you. A lot of this is not known. And as we think about where we are as a society today, it helps us to move forward, because when we think about the past and we think about slavery and we think about the people then, I'm not sure that people then were any better or worse than we are. And so I think, the real relevancy of history is to think about ourselves in the moment we're in now, and how do we engage our issues, whether it's inequities in our society, whether it's immigration issues, what are the human issues today, and what are we doing about it? So hopefully, history is fascinating and we can learn a lot, but really it's about moving forward, I think, and making the world a better place, just to put it in common terms. But we can use our history to do that.
Yeah, I think it's really important to think about the history and how history got us to where we are today. Other questions from anybody in the group?
This is from a question that I got. So what generated the initial inquiry and study into the African history in Old Salem? Was that the tornado hitting the church, or was it before or after that?
That's a great question. Well, actually, back in the early 1980s, Gene Capps was our director of education, and he had already begun incorporating stories of people of African descent into some of the visitor experience. So that was happening. And actually, when I was in graduate school, I did an internship at Old Salem in the mid 80s, and then my first job was at Old Salem. And part of what we did when I was there was to begin measured drawings of the church building of St. Philip's. While it was a vacant building, it was used as a storage facility for the Salem congregation. So we were engaged in that. That was in 1986. And then the tornado in 1989, I don't know if some of you all remember that, hitting Winston-Salem, devastated Salem Square and buildings in Old Salem, and including St. Philip's. That was definitely a catalyst. And, the roof was damaged. And as you all know, if you have a hole in your roof, if you don't fix it, you're not going to have a building for long. So it really, it got the community focused on this building and the story. And this ad hoc committee was established with a fellow named Bob Hoffman from Home Moravian Church and Reverend Rodney from St. Philip's, who were the leaders. And it involved Old Salem staff. It involved Moravian officials, involved scholars from the community, Winston-Salem State and Wake Forest and beyond. So it was a real concerted effort by many entities to think about this. And so, as I said, it was years of research. The church, the 1890 addition that I showed you all to the front of St. Philip's was actually built over part of the first graveyard there. And so there was major failure in part of the structure. So there was major engineering that had to happen, and architectural restoration, and of course all of this scholarship to understand stories. And then this archaeology. We did archaeology on the log church site, and that was reconstructed. So work had begun in Old Salem in the 1980s, but certainly it was the tornado that really got things going. Old Salem, the site opened in 2003, so Old Salem was fairly early as a museum to address African American history. And then our new president, Frank Vanier, came in December of 2016 recognizing the work that had happened, and he really put us on the trajectory of this new initiative, which is the Hidden Town Project. So that's sort of an answer. I hope that works.
Martha, hi, I'm Vivian Coates. I really appreciate your presentation. It was so just amazing, and I'm still processing, and I think it'll take me probably weeks to just process all of the learning that I've absorbed just through your 40-minute presentation. So thank you. Once we're all able to go back to sort of being back out in public without concerns of the pandemic, if I were to go to Old Salem and do a tour, would we be able to have access to the St. Philip's Church and sort of that the Negro God's Acre, or any of those resources that you showed us over your presentation, just to get more of that sort of history and learning in person?
Well, thank you, Vivian. Yes, that's a great question. St. Philip's, the whole complex, is a major part of our visitor experience. It is an exhibit site. And also, the Hidden Town Project, we worked with our curator to make the Hidden Town a part of every experience in Old Salem. So no matter if you go to the doctor's house, or the John Vogler house, or the Single Brothers house, or the Winkler Bakery, or the Mitch house, wherever you visit, you will encounter Hidden Town information. So that's been a major emphasis, and that is to integrate all the stories, as we learn the stories, to integrate them into the whole experience, so that when you visit Old Salem, it is this holistic experience. And I just have to tell you that part of this has been staff education. We've had to bring consultants in to help us, especially our frontline staff who actually are in costume and deal with visitors, because talking about slavery is very difficult. And, a lot of people come to Old Salem and expect to see pretty buildings and eat sugar cookies and, to have that sort of level experience. So when people are engaged with issues of human bondage and all of the ramifications, some people are really aggressively uncomfortable with our staff. And so our staff has to learn how to diffuse situations and how to, get beyond that. So it's not so easy, but it's part of our mandate, and so we are doing that. But it's also, you have no idea what baggage people bring when they come to visit a historic site. So it really takes it a whole nother level in terms of a museum experience. But, it's the truth. And so why would we pretend to not tell the truth? But thank you for that, Vivian. It is hard to process. It's difficult. The history is very difficult. The history of this country is very difficult.
Martha, I know we got a question about how can we are recording this, and we certainly can share this with the folks who are on the call today and make it available through social media. But is there a way that if people have been on the call today and they want to talk with other folks in the community about the Hidden Town Project, that they can reach out to you or somebody else to find out more?
Absolutely. We on our website, oldsalem.org, there is a way to ask questions. So you can certainly have a Hidden Town email. So if you want to ask questions, or you have comments, or you have suggestions or ideas, please engage us. We welcome that. And there is a Hidden Town Project webpage on on the Old Salem site. So that may be of interest to you. There's more detail there about some of the research that we've done and specific information that we've discovered about some of the lots. So that's if you're interested in further information, there's more detail there.
Thank you so much, Martha. Are there any other questions from anybody on the call? I think I gave it 7 seconds, which is what I've been taught to do. Brittany, before we wrap up, do you want to do the drawing?
Yes. So
and tell us what's in the basket too.
Yes. So thank you so much, Martha. So we are giving away a gift basket of some Old Salem goodies. And we have the original Moravian cookie, the ginger cookies. These are my favorite. And then we have the Love Feast Fun mix that you can make at home. And we have a couple of just like North Carolina memorabilia, a tea towel and a mug. And then Shut the Box, which is a colonial dice game. Not sure exactly what this is. And then we have a little Moravian star. Okay, so I'm hoping that whoever I picked will still be on the call. Okay, so Britney Gaspari, and I think Brittany is from the Winston-Salem Foundation. Brittany, are you still on the line?
I am.
Yay! Congrats. So
that's hilarious because I just ordered that game for my kids.
Oh my God, you're gonna have two. I'll shoot you an email to coordinate getting this to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Martha, for the presentation.
Yeah, so just to wrap up, everybody, thank you for being on today. Martha, again, our thanks directly to you from the Women of Womble and Womble Bond Dickinson as a whole for the work that you've done in this community and on this project. I think it's so important. I think it'll be important. Frankly, I want to share this this presentation with everybody at our firm. You know, it's something we all need to start talking about. If we're ever going to get away from the uncomfortability we were talking about, we're going to have to learn to talk about it. So thank you again a million times for talking with us today. Thanks to everybody for joining the call. If you haven't gotten to see the chat, Martha, folks are saying what a powerful presentation it was. And this is my second time seeing it, and I learned something new every time, both times, and I'll hear it again. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll make the recording available for you to share with folks, and hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll all get a chance to go out to Old Salem and see this part of our history firsthand. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all.
Thank you.
All right.